My world shattered today. My youngest son took his own life, and now my daughter blames us, my wife and me, for how we treated him. The pain is unbearable, made worse by my daughter's silence. She won't even speak to us anymore. I've always tried to be a good father to my 3 children. My oldest is 27, my daughter is 23, and my youngest was 20. When my youngest was 6, we discovered he had autism. The diagnosis hit us like a thunderbolt, but we immediately jumped into action. We wanted to give him every possible support and advantage in life. We researched extensively, met with countless specialists, and enrolled him in various therapies to help with his social skills and behavior. But from the very beginning, my son pushed back. He didn't want any special treatment. "I want to be normal," he would say, his eyes pleading with us. "I don't want to be different." We tried explaining that the help we were providing was necessary, that it would help him achieve the same results as other kids his age. We encouraged him to be proud of who he was and not let others' expectations define him. Our community was incredibly supportive. Teachers, friends, family, everyone did their best to accommodate him and make him feel included. But my son saw things differently. To him, the special treatment felt like a mark of shame. He believed he was just as capable as his peers, even before his diagnosis. Every time someone offered him extra help, whether it was additional time for tests or strategies for social interactions, he would firmly refuse. "I don't need help," he would insist, coming up with endless excuses to avoid these situations. His refusals were consistent and passionate, and nothing we said could change his mind. As parents, we found ourselves in an impossible situation. While we wanted to respect his wishes, we also knew these supports were crucial for his development. This created a growing tension between us, as he became increasingly frustrated with our attempts to help, and we grew more desperate to ensure he got the support we believed he needed. As he entered his teenage years, his struggle with the autism diagnosis intensified. His desire to be seen as normal became all-consuming, leading him to take drastic measures to distance himself from anything related to autism. During his earlier years, he had reluctantly accepted the special accommodations, but as adolescence hit, his resentment grew stronger. He started isolating himself, spending hours alone in his room, avoiding family gatherings and activities. The bright, curious child we once knew was disappearing behind a wall of anger and withdrawal. When he turned 13, he came to us with a request that broke our hearts. He wanted to transfer to a different school where nobody knew about his autism. He believed a fresh start would finally give him the normal life he craved. His plea was desperate and heartfelt. He explained how everyone at his current school saw him through the lens of his diagnosis. Teachers treated him with caution, and classmates kept their distance, unsure how to interact with him. My wife and I understood his perspective, but we were terrified. Without the support systems at his current school, the specialized attention, the individualized education plans, the trained staff, we worried he would struggle even more. We feared that keeping his autism a secret would put enormous pressure on him, potentially making his anxiety and depression worse. We believed that accepting himself and learning to advocate for his needs was crucial for his long-term well-being. Our decision to deny his request was met with intense anger and disappointment. He felt betrayed and unheard, convinced we weren't considering his feelings. This created a rift between us that grew wider with each passing year. He became more withdrawn, his interactions with us more strained. He began to see our insistence on support as control rather than care, which only deepened his sense of isolation and resentment. By his early teens, my son's frustrations had evolved into severe depression. The spark that once lit up his eyes had dimmed, replaced by a deep, consuming despair. What made it even harder was his absolute refusal to accept any help. His rejection went beyond just autism-related support. He wouldn't take medication or see a therapist, even though his mental health was rapidly deteriorating. To him, accepting any kind of help meant admitting he was different, something he desperately wanted to avoid. One day, during a rare moment of openness, he made us a proposition. He offered to seek treatment for his depression if we agreed to let him transfer to a different school where no one knew about his autism. "I just want a fresh start," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "a chance to be normal." His siblings supported the idea, and even some of his teachers thought it might help. But my wife and I couldn't shake our fears. The thought of him being in a new environment without proper support terrified us. Despite the encouragement from others, we stood firm in our decision to keep him where he was. The look of betrayal in his eyes when we said no still haunts me. He was convinced we cared more about our fears than his well-being. The already fragile relationship between us cracked even further. Then came the darkest day. When he was 15, he attempted to take his own life. Finding him that night, I can't even put into words the horror and heartbreak. Thankfully, he survived, but the incident left deep emotional scars on all of us. When he turned 18 and graduated high school, he got accepted into his dream university. Our pride in his achievement quickly turned to ash in our mouths when he packed his bags and cut all contact with us. It was as if he'd been counting down the days until he could finally break free. He stayed in touch with his siblings, but wanted nothing to do with my wife and me. The goodbye letter he left behind was filled with anger that cut straight to my heart. He accused us of ruining 12 years of his life, claiming our insistence on special treatment had made him feel crazy, stupid, and awkward. He wrote that we were the reason he was still depressed and suicidal. "I hate you with a passion," he declared. Those words still echo in my mind during sleepless nights. We tried everything to reach him, calls, letters, emails, but he remained silent. Once, we even visited him at his university, hoping that seeing us in person might soften his resolve. Instead, he threatened to get a restraining order if we didn't leave him alone. That was the last time we saw him face to face. After that, our only glimpses into his life came through his siblings, who told us he seemed to be doing better, despite still struggling with depression. Then today happened. The news came through my daughter. "He's gone," she said, her voice breaking over the phone. "He overdosed." The words felt unreal, like I was trapped in some horrible nightmare. But it wasn't just news of his death that my daughter brought. She unleashed years of pent-up anger and blame. "This is your fault," she screamed at us. "You should have listened to him. You should have let him be who he wanted to be. You failed as parents, and I don't know if I can forgive you for that." Each word felt like a physical blow. My oldest tried to mediate at first, but ended up agreeing with his sister. He told us we needed to acknowledge our mistakes, that our rigid approach had pushed their brother further into despair. The argument that followed was brutal. My daughter, who had planned to stay with us through New Year's, packed her bags in a fury. Standing at the door with her suitcase, she delivered one final blow. "If you want to keep a relationship with me, you need to admit what you did wrong. Learn from this, or I don't want people like you as parents." Then she was gone, leaving my wife and me standing in our suddenly too quiet living room. That was almost a year ago. Tomorrow would have been my son's 21st birthday. The date looms over us like a dark cloud, impossible to ignore no matter how hard we try to distract ourselves with mundane tasks. He never liked celebrating his birthday, saw it as just another reminder that time was passing without things getting better. Now it's just another reminder of what we've lost. My daughter hasn't spoken to us in 10 months. She moved to New York for a PhD program, and we don't even know her address anymore. My oldest still talks to her regularly, but refuses to help bridge the gap between us. She has every right to stay away, he says, sharing her belief that we drove their brother to his death. The weight of all this has been too much for me to bear. About 2 years ago, I started drinking. It began right after my son left for university, cutting us off completely. The betrayal and sense of failure pushed me toward the bottle. Before all this, I'd only drink on special occasions, holidays, parties, date nights. Now, vodka has become my constant companion. On weekdays, I down 2 to 5 shots, but weekends are worse. I can finish an entire bottle. Sometimes I switch to wine, drinking even more. My wife says I become a different person when I'm drunk, filling our house with angry screams. I'm not violent, but my rage echoes through every room. We barely talk anymore, except for those few precious hours on weekends when I'm briefly sober. But even those moments are tainted by the knowledge that my next drink is just around the corner. I've tried to get it under control multiple times with my wife's help, During those better periods, I still drink almost daily, but manage to keep it from getting out of hand. It never lasts, though. Something always triggers me. A memory, a photo, the sight of my son's empty room, and I'm back to drowning my pain in alcohol. My wife is slipping away from me, too. The person I become when I'm drunk is a stranger to her, bitter, angry, unreachable. We used to be a team, facing life's challenges together. Now she's fighting this battle alone while I lose myself in the bottom of a bottle. The love that held us together for so many years is being eaten away by my alcoholism, one drink at a time. Looking back at everything that's happened, I can see where we went wrong. All those times my son begged us to stop the special treatment, to just let him be like everyone else. We didn't really listen. We were so convinced we knew what was best that we couldn't see how much we were hurting him. His eyes would fill with frustration every time we mentioned therapy or special accommodations. "I don't need this," he'd plead, but we couldn't see past our own beliefs. It's only now, after losing him forever, that I truly understand. Sometimes listening to and respecting someone's wishes is more important than forcing what you think is best. My son needed us to hear him, to understand his desperate desire for normalcy. Instead, our insistence on what we thought was right created a divide that became impossible to bridge. Now our family lies in ruins, one child dead, another refusing to speak to us, and the third barely maintaining contact. My marriage is crumbling under the weight of my drinking, and the guilt of what we might have done wrong haunts every moment of every day. The house that once rang with children's laughter is now filled only with the sound of my drunken rage and my wife's silent tears. They say time heals all wounds, but some cuts run too deep. The pain of losing my son, the knowledge that we might have prevented it, the loss of my daughter's love, these aren't wounds that will ever fully heal. Their scars will carry forever, reminders of the devastating price of not truly listening to those we love most.